Hello and welcome to Political Brew. I'm Phil Hirschkorn. Today's topics: the U.S. Senate race. Graham Platner is out as the Democratic nominee. Who might replace him? And what does this mean for Susan Collins? And later, checking in on the Maine governor's race and the race for the U.S. House in the 2nd Congressional District. Today, I'm joined by Betsy, a Democrat, longtime people's lobbyist in Augusta, and former candidate for U.S. Senate and governor. And Joe Bruno, a Republican, former state legislator and Maine House Minority Leader. Thank you both for being here.
Yes.
The dream is over. Graham Platner quit the U.S. Senate race this week, a month after cruising to victory in the Democratic primary with 72% of the vote. And 2 days after an ex-girlfriend went public with her story accusing Platner of rape. Politico broke the story at 3:18 p.m. on Monday, quoting Jenny Rassicott, an on-again, off-again girlfriend of 2 years, who described how an uninvited, drunk Platner barged into her Hancock County home one night in 2021 and forced her to have sex. She said, "I remember him grabbing my pelvis and being really forceful of me. I remember the specific moment where I thought to myself, like, this is no longer my choice." 11 minutes after Politico published, Platner posted a video denying it.
Any accusation of non-consensual behavior is categorically false.
But Rassicott, who's the same age as Platner, 41, retold her story in a CNN interview.
I don't believe that you can think that that scenario was consensual. You have to understand that that wasn't. When somebody is repeatedly, when somebody in the middle of it says, "Don't touch me," that's...
Immediately, Platner's endorsements from local and national Democrats were rescinded, with calls to withdraw, and on Wednesday, Platner did.
The national level party, the bigger donor networks, they have all committed to spending no money in this race if I'm in it. They would rather see Susan Collins win than have me be the next senator from Maine.
Well, Betsy, you were someone who backed Platner pretty much from the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's heartbreaking all around, right? I think it's heartbreaking for Jenny. I think it's heartbreaking for Graham. But I think the thing that we have to maintain, the most important thing here, is to not lose sight of what Graham's campaign catalyzed and what they unleashed from the genie bottle. And that wasn't really all about Graham. Yes, he was an effective communicator, but it was what he stood for, which is disrupting the system that is rigged against normal Mainers, normal people in this country, the policies that he stood for, health care, child care, affordable housing. That's what people were excited about. That is what people are excited about. That's what led to someone getting all the signatures in 2 days. More people voting in a Democratic primary than ever in the history of Maine, getting more votes altogether than all the gubernatorial candidates put together. So that's the part that we can't lose, and that's the part that is the challenge to the Democratic Party to hold on to now, because that's real. And those people's beliefs and what we believe in is real. And that is those policy things. I think, it's the tendency of everyone in the media and, the politicos up in the national scene to focus on the person, and they want to ignore the policies. And interestingly, not once in this whole thing did anyone on the other side or within the party challenge Platner's positions. It was all personal. And I think that is the thing that we must hold on to. And that is the thing that we must listen to, because that's where people are in this state.
Joe?
I felt all along that he was the perfect made-up candidates by political consultants. Good-looking, rugged guy. Calls himself an oyster farmer, even though he's not really an oyster farmer. He does it as a hobby.
Joe.
He had a lot of baggage that everybody knew about, yet he was still the candidate, which I couldn't understand as a Republican, going, we all hear about these stories. They're all going to come out. And when they came out, this is what happens. But I read an article somewhere where he was the Manchurian candidate. Remember that movie about the Manchurian candidate? He's it. Put on the yellow bean clothes, go out on the water in your boat, look like you actually work on the water. And people gravitated to that. They wanted that rugged-looking guy who was going to run against Susan Collins. That's what it was. It was never real from the very beginning. Well, and then there's rumors out there now that there may have been some party manipulation to get him out of the race. A rumor has it that the AG may have called Graham Platner recently to tell him to get out, or there may be a prosecution.
Over this?
Over this, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, the Hancock County DA has told us he can't say one way or the other.
Yeah, right.
There's even a criminal investigation.
But this came out of the Maine AG's office.
I understand.
Who is connected to Janet Mills, who's still bitter over losing to Graham Platner. So if all that is true, Democrats have a real problem.
Well, can I just say one thing about the authenticity? I don't know if you've ever met him.
No, I haven't.
He's not a made-up guy.
Yeah.
He's not a made-up oyster farmer. He's not a made-up rugged guy. He's a guy who serves tours of duty in the military. He works on the water. He is an oyster farmer. So you can say whatever you want about him, but the authenticity, just like originally that was the issue with Trump, I think, why people liked him, is real. And if you can't meet him, you've met him, you can't meet him and feel like this is some guy playing a role. That's not who this is. So anyway, I think to keep focusing on the person and to ignore the policy is to the detriment, not just of the Democrats, but to the Republicans.
But I think we said early on, weeks ago, character still matters. And this spoke to his character. And character is what makes you a decision maker. Your character helps you make decisions. This kind of stuff that happened here is not good for his character.
No, and I think I agree with you, and I think that it's so interesting, right? Because we also have Clarence Thomas, Brett Kavanaugh, Pete Hegseth, Donald Trump, two of whom have actually been convicted of sexual miscrimes, and that's okay.
No, I did not say that was okay.
I know you didn't, but I'm just saying.
I don't think convicted is right. I mean, President Trump was found liable in a civil lawsuit.
Okay. But anyway, I just think it's a fascinating and a rich thing coming from Republicans. Like I think we need to all stick to the issues, because if we want to go to character, it's a whole different question.
Betsy, let me ask you this, and then Joe will come back to you. You talked about separating the man from the message. Maybe that's wishful because, Graham said this isn't just a campaign, this is a movement. But movements do need leaders.
And there's lots of them. There's lots of people in Maine who are leading this movement. Ben Chin.
His campaign manager.
Yeah, his campaign manager. Shenna. I mean, there's lots of people. And on the local level, when you have 15,000 volunteers, I think we are stuck in this thing that's going to hurt us in history. We all want the savior, right? We want the person who's going to lead us out, who's going to part the waters and let us go. And I think we are in a time with social media and where we are and the level of threat to our democracy where there's not going to be a leader. We were hoping Obama was going to be that. We were hoping, I think the Republicans hoped that Trump was going to be that. There's no one leader. This is going to come from us and in the communities, and the number of leaders in our local communities and stuff who are engaged now, who never were, is what we're going to see moving us forward.
Joe,
I think the Democratic Socialists ought to start their own party. They are not Democrats anymore. Just say who we are. We're socialists of America. Let's start our own party. And as far as Donald Trump, the reason Donald Trump got elected in 2016 is because you had a terrible candidate in Hillary Clinton. And Obama caused the economic mess that the country was in, so people went to Trump. Same thing happened in 24. You had Joe Biden screw up the entire country, and then you had a terrible candidate in Kamala Harris. That's why Donald Trump got elected a second time. I think, so I am not a Donald Trump, rah-rah MAGA guy. But I had no choice in the election. It was either Harris or Clinton, and I wasn't going to vote for either one of them after what the previous 8 years were like.
Well, Maine Democrats are going to have a lot of new choices. When we come back, we'll talk about that. Who might the party tap to replace Graham Platner? Graham Platner announced his intention to withdraw from the Senate race before the July 13th deadline to do so. Now, the Maine Democratic Party and its 113-member committee will have until July 27th to choose a replacement candidate. Well, who's interested? The list starts with 3 also-rans for governor: former Maine CDC Director Nirav Shah, the runner-up in the Democratic primary; former State Senate President Troy Jackson, who placed 3rd, arguably the closest ideologically to Platner; and Secretary of State Shenna Bellows, who placed 4th in the primary, but badly lost the 2012 Senate race to Susan Collins. Also in is Jordan Wood, the former congressional staffer who finished 3rd behind Matt Dunlap and Joe Baldacci in the CD2 Democratic House primary. We heard from Shaw and Wood the morning after Platner dropped out.
This race is a referendum on Senator Collins and her enabling of Donald Trump's worst instincts and most harmful policies.
I represent a new generation of leadership, as does Graham. He's only a few years older than I am. Our commitment to anti-corruption money politics reform is very important to me. Medicare for all, universal child care, these are issues I have always campaigned on, and it's the same platform that Graham supports.
Later, Shenna Bellows told reporters over Zoom why she's getting in the race.
The people of Maine started a movement, and they deserve to have a leader who helped them finish it in November and deliver on the promise for working people, to stand up and fight back against the massive corporations and billionaires who are screwing people over.
Troy Jackson, who was the first to announce, unveiled a new look, or an old one, the full working class mode for the 5th-generation logger from Allagash. That's his new official Senate campaign headshot. No more Senator President coat and tie. Joe, let's start with you. Who is Susan Collins most afraid of? You're the chair of her CD1 group campaign?
Yeah. I don't think she's afraid of any of them. I mean, face it.
They're not going to be able to raise the amount of money they need to run an effective campaign. You're going to have 100 days, is that right? 120 days, maybe. I mean, here you go, Troy Jackson dressing up as a logger. He hasn't worked in the woods in 30 years, but he dug out his clothes from the closet, hopefully a seated closet, so it doesn't have mothballs, you know, and wear that outfit to say, look, I'm a rugged guy and I'm a real Mainer. I worked in the woods. I mean, come on. What about his policies? His policies are just as bad as Platner's. He's been endorsed. He's been endorsed by Bernie Sanders. The same, you know, so he's the most likely candidate, you know, and this whole campaign and the way it's going to be run with the, you know, all these, you know, signatures and 600 people.
This is a pop-up convention we think the Democrats are going to have. Right.
I hope it's transparent. And
all of us do.
and I hope they use ranked choice voting.
All of us do.
You know, the question is, will they? Because how are you going to count all those ballots in a day or two? Yeah. You know, we'll see. How much do they love ranked choice voting? Because if they don't do ranked choice voting, it's going to be interesting who's going to call them out and say, well, that didn't seem fair to me. You didn't do ranked choice voting.
Well, they got to use ranked choice voting because if you notice, in the second CD, in the governor's race, in all of these races, the outcome would be very different without ranked choice voting. Right. So I think that's a given. I think we're still waiting for the details to come. Yeah. And I think, you know, I think Susan should be afraid because, you know, in the latest Siena poll, if you just put up any Democrat, they win 52-43 against Susan Collins. That's how unpopular her support of Donald Trump, her support of the economic policies, the war in Iran, the genocide in Gaza, that's how unpopular all of that is. So any Democrat, right, is 52-43 up on Senator Collins. So honestly, as long as that becomes the thing, and the thing that people care most about, it turns out, one of the things that people care most about, is certainly among Democrats, is control of the Senate. And so if Susan Collins isn't in that map, and that national map includes Maine, that's going to weigh very heavily, and there's nothing she can do to escape that.
It's interesting to me how most of those Democrats we mentioned dumped Platner so harshly right away. Everyone did. But they're still adhering to a lot of his message. Because
that's what I think we aren't understanding or people aren't grasping, which is he didn't unleash let's love Graham. He unleashed let's take back our power in this political system based on the issues and the needs and the conditions of Mainers today. And that's what people are excited about. That's what people are not only excited about, that's what they're desperate for. Right? The system, I mean, Donald Trump said the system is rigged. Bernie Sanders said the system is rigged. Every Mainer. You can't go to a single Mainer in this state and say, you think the political system's working for you? You think the economic system's working for you? And with the exception of maybe 4 or 5 people at the way top, they're going to say no.
Joe, if one of those former gubernatorial candidates wins, they do have records in public service, unlike Graham Platner. That would be something that Collins would have to deal with.
Shanna only lost by 30 points last time she ran.
But that was before she was the Shanna Bellows of today, right?
Yes, right.
Well,
Before she was secretary.
you're still the
Just an
same
ACLU
person.
executive director.
Exactly. Yeah, you're still the same Shanna Bellows.
Okay.
Yeah, I do think the most effective candidate may be Troy Jackson, or Jordan Wood. Jordan Wood surprised me how well he did in that in that race for CD2.
Half of Collins' age.
Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah,
He's
literally.
36, she's 73.
Sure.
I mean, you want to talk about generational change?
Yeah.
There it is.
Yeah, right,
Yeah.
exactly.
I mean, the others are only 40, late 40s,
Right,
early
yeah,
50s.
yeah. Well, I didn't run because I'm the same generation.
Are you announcing your candidacy on the show?
Well, hold tight, no.
And I do think,
you know, I do think that that's part of my calculation.
Yeah.
Is that I do think it's time for young people. It's time for a different generation of people, which is because the problems that we face can't be dealt with in the same old way, with the same old thinking. You know, was it Einstein who said we can't use the same thinking that got us into the problem to get us out? We are, the U.S. Senate and Congress is a stale, stagnant place full of people, some of whom live in the hospital right now. You know, I mean, it is a place where we have to have new ideas. And unfortunately, there's very few people who can do that.
we need new ideas that are feasible and can work.
Yeah, absolutely.
Some of these ideas are way out there and are so expensive, they do not work.
You don't want to tax billionaires, Joe? Tax them more?
Billionaires pay, 50% of the taxes in this country already.
But we can pay $1 billion, billions of dollars a day to do a war that no one's declared?
Well,
If we spent what we did on the war so far, we would pay for health care for every American and child care for every American already. And instead, we're spending on that. So there's money for that, but there's not money for what everyone in Maine needs.
But when you talk about that Gaza genocide, you do know Hamas came into Israel and killed all kinds of
Yes,
infants.
absolutely, absolutely.
Well, we'll see who the candidate is, and we may even have a debate among them on this channel. We'll see. We're going to take another quick break. When we come back, what does the Democrats' turmoil mean for Susan Collins? 5-term incumbent Republican Senator Susan Collins is the person most directly affected by Graham Platner's withdrawal. Who will her opponent be? Will he or she be 30 years younger like Platner was? A desire for generational change reemerging? Her health, her age? Look at this video I filmed at the July 4th parade in Jay. There's 73-year-old Collins in her American flag shirt running in the parade in the 90-degree heat, catching up with her staff and supporters carrying banners and signs, running again and again in a new pair of made in Skowhegan, New Balance sneakers, of course. She told me all the running back and forth between her office and the Senate floor leaves her in good shape. And I would say seeing Collins meeting and greeting so many people underscored how much the race may come down to voters' comfort with her versus a desire to change party control in Congress, for instance. Collins is going to defend her record, stressing bipartisanship and breaks with President Trump, delivering federal funds to Maine, and getting things done, like persuading the Treasury Department to reopen IRS taxpayer assistance centers in Augusta and Bangor, the latter a result of this Appropriations Committee exchange in April.
These closures mean that someone from my hometown of Caribou, Maine, who needs in-person service, faces a 10-hour plus round trip to the nearest taxpayer assistance center in Portland.
I have instructed the IRS to look into this, and we will be getting back to you.
And the Treasury Department told us this week that they did reverse course because of her intervention. Joe, this is the Susan Collins you know and love.
Exactly. This is what Susan has done for the state of Maine. She has brought $1.5 billion to the state of Maine. She has gotten many fire departments what they needed for new fire stations in small towns. In my town of Raymond, when I was on the select board, she got us a boat, a Coast Guard boat, to patrol Sebago Lake. That's what Susan Collins does for the people of Maine. And I don't think there is one Democrat that may run against her who can do what Susan Collins does, because you don't become the chair of the Appropriations Committee in Washington without seniority.
Yeah, and I give her all the props in the world for those things. She cuts a lot of ribbons. Good for her. She also cuts our health care. She also cuts women's rights. She also cuts a lot of things. And if you look at the money she's brought in, and these numbers will come out, the money she's brought in, awesome. Good for her. Great. And the money that's gone out as a result of her votes, based on Medicaid and what we're going to see in November when this big, beautiful bill comes into play, it's this in and this out for everyday Mainers. So we can't just talk about the one thing. Lots of people, you can look at Shelley Pingree's record, you look at Angus King's record. That's what people do. And yes, she probably has brought in more because she's chair of appropriations, but she has also not stopped the draining of our pockets to go to things that we not only don't care about, we are opposed to. So I think we just have to look at the whole picture. And quite honestly, I think the age thing is a false thing. Great, go run a marathon. That's great. It is nothing about what the policies are. And, I think we just we're so in this TV era of like, oh, what do they look like? What do they sound like? Whether it's you're worried about Graham looking like a rugged, or Troy looking like a rugged guy and Susan running in her American flag shirt. That's immaterial to any of us in terms of what's happening to us every day. When we go into the grocery store and we can't afford it, when we go to the gas pump and we can't afford it, we're asked to send our sons and daughters across the world to go fight in a war. Those are the things, can't buy a home, those are the things that matter to people. And if we would focus on those things, I think a lot more people would be engaged in that conversation than in whether Susan Collins wore a flag shirt or Troy Janks wore a logging hat.
Susan Collins did not vote for the big, beautiful bill. Let's make that straight.
Not for final passage.
No,
not for final passage.
She voted to get it out of committee, and had she voted not
out of committee,
hang on,
and start the process.
Same thing.
Can I speak?
Well, yeah.
I let you speak.
I know.
Okay, it's my turn to speak now.
Go.
Susan Collins didn't vote for the final passage. What is happening in the state of Maine that people can't afford is the Maine legislature that has been run by Democrats for 48 out of the last 50 years. That's the problem in Maine. That's why people can't afford to live here. People who go to work every single day, are looking around and saying there's all kinds of job openings. Why aren't people going to work? And what do we get? We get nothing out of Augusta. Janet Mills cuts $400 million out of the transportation budget. We have potholes everywhere. That's the Maine legislature. That's Democrats. Ryan Fecto gets an executive director position at Biddeford Housing. Why? Because he's going to bring money back to Biddeford. That's how it all works in Augusta. You want to talk about corruption? There you go. Augusta is corrupt.
Well, it follows from Washington, right? And there's nothing the Maine legislature can do about tax prices and fertilizer prices that lead to the cost of food that are a result of a war that nobody's agreed to except for Donald Trump. So I just think, I think we can all agree that none of us think that this political system is working very well for anyone. But I just think we have to just look at the whole picture. And I think just to pick out one slice of things here or there is not the way to do it. I think we have to look at the whole thing. And I think, and again, I think that, I think for so many people, the things, and I do want to say that I think that her brilliance at playing the game of voting for something out of committee so she knows it'll move forward and she knows they have the votes for it because they don't need her, and then voting against it on the floor is so she can play both ends against the middle. She can say to Donald Trump, I'm doing your business, and she can say to Maine people, look how moderate I am. So I just think it's, I admire her ability to do that, but if you know Washington and you know how things work in Washington or Augusta, we know that she could have stopped a lot of those things in committee and they never would have come forward, and that would have been actually voting against something.
That is the Democratic line on Susan Collins. Oh, she knows what she's doing.
Of course she does. She's brilliant.
She doesn't. She votes the way she feels that is right. She's been the most nonpartisan senator voted by her colleagues and all other people who look at that stuff for 5 years in a row. Why? Because she truly is nonpartisan. She does what she feels is right for the state of Maine.
Or bipartisan. That's the Lugar Index at Georgia.
And she votes with Trump 94% of the time.
That's not true either.
Yeah, it is.
Well, that was in 2025. Yeah. Not all the years.
It's all true, right?
Well, just when you thought the Senate race was over, we've got four more months to go. Yeah. And we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, other races on the Maine November ballot for governor and the U.S. House. Let's not forget, Maine has a very competitive governor's race on the ballot, too, this November, with Republican Bobby Charles and Democrat Hannah Pingree at the top of their party tickets. And yes, they're talking about each other.
I'd say Bobby Charles has spent his career in Washington lobbying and working in federal government, in a really dysfunctional federal government. And I've spent my career working in public service trying to improve the lives of Maine people, from working in my local community to building housing for Maine people to helping fishermen recovering from storms. We've been able to get the job done.
Hannah Pingree, you are simply out of touch with what average Mainers want and can afford, and you are responsible, unfortunately, for a lot of what they suffer. If you want change, please vote BobbyForMaine.com.
So, Betsy, what Bobby Charles is getting at is Hannah Pingree's work with Governor Janet Mills, 6-7 years as the head of the Office of the Future, which had a hand in all the policies that Hannah was bragging about. How do you see their records and resumes matching up?
You know, I think Hannah's got a long record. She was also Speaker of the House for a long time when lots of good things happened. And she, you know, I think if you look at climate change and some of the stuff she's done with Janet, and she differs with Janet where the Mills administration is on a number of things, most notably tribal sovereignty and some other economic things. But I think that when you look what Bobby Charles says, you know, it's easy to not be in government as a governor and say, he said he's going to cut $3 billion from the budget.
I think $4 billion.
$4 billion? Okay, $4 billion. Now, Joe's been on the Appropriations Committee. There is no way you cut $4 billion out of the Maine state budget, which is almost close to half, and not devastate the lives of Mainers. So I think that kind of statement, you know, it's good, it's great TV spots for running in November, but when you actually do it, and we saw this under LePage, when he actually came in to do it, he wasn't able to do everything he did, and a lot of what he did was devastating, and we have been having to make up for it for the last 8 years. So I think, you know, again, it's so important, and I think even more so on a governor's level than in the Senate, on a federal level office, people have to understand how it works, and they have to know the actual impact of what they're talking about, and I just don't think Bobby Charles has that kind of experience.
Joe, is the party and all the people who supported the other 6 or more candidates that are on the ballot, you supported Ben Midgley. Is the party uniting behind Bobby Charles?
No.
Tell me more.
It's a problem. I mean, Bobby Charles has no money, obviously. His campaign was all on social media. He didn't have money to run TV ads and what's necessary to get voters out there. There's a lot of disaffected Republicans right now who don't believe he has a chance to win. And I'm one of them. I just think he gets to 35% of the vote, and that's his max, and there's nobody else. And, you know, Rick Bennett, I mean, I don't believe that poll that came out showing him at 8%. I know he's working it hard, both sides, Democrats and Republicans. And, you know, he may actually raise more money than Bobby Charles as an independent. And Hannah Pingree will have all the money in the world, so she doesn't need to worry about it.
Bennett will be unveiling his tax affordability plan next week, so we'll talk about that more in the next show. The U.S. House race for the 2nd Congressional District is off to a relatively slow start with Democrat Matt Dunlap versus his opponent, former Governor Paul LePage, in the Republican line. Dunlap has made one public appearance since winning the ranked choice voting runoff before the Maine AFL-CIO.
Over the last few decades, the entire economy has slowly gotten tilted against us because you don't have an army of lobbyists in Washington working for you. That's what Congress is supposed to do, and that's what I intend to do.
Meanwhile, LePage tweeted this week, "Let's be clear, Matt Dunlap endorsed Graham Platner. He stood by him when the Nazi tattoo was found after it became public. He was texting women not long after he was married. He spoke at rallies with him. Now he's trying to flip-flop. Just another reason Matt Dunlap can't be trusted," says Paul LePage. Matt's your guy, was in the primary. How do you see this race shaping up? Early days.
You know, I think there's nobody paying attention to this race now for the last week and a half.
We are. That's why I mentioned it.
I know. I'm impressed. I have to say, thank you. I'm impressed. So I think that's the only explanation for what Matt's doing. But I think that, you know, we're going to see again a reasonable, competent guy that people can trust, and LePage can make all the accusations he wants. We have him actually doing the things, calling. In a hopefully it was an inebriated state. It wasn't who he really was. Drew Gatine, and you know, calling all kinds of horrible names. Doing, you know, I mean, so again, this character thing, that this race can't if Paul LePage tries to make this race about Matt Dunlap's character, he loses.
So you think it's about Paul LePage's record and Matt's long record of public service?
I honestly don't think it's about Paul LePage's character either. I think it's about their policies, and I think that, again, the policies of LePage that mirror the policies of Trump are what I think most people, despite what Joe says, what most people believe is affecting them.
Let's look
What's
at the
second
economic
CD race about?
Let's look at the economic record of when LePage was governor and how Maine was actually growing. Compared to now, 0%.
But he's not running for that job.
I know. So if you're going to attack his record and say he devastated the state, it's absolutely a lie.
Ask all the
it's
people who
not
lost
true.
their health care.
Yeah. Okay. It's not true. But anyway, so in that second CD, LePage wins easily.
Why? Because it's just the demographics. It voted
the
for Trump 3
demographic,
times.
it's a red district. Jared Golden, was more middle of the road. He was more appealing to the independents.
As a military veteran.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Mike Michaud held that district. Joe Baldacci held that district. I mean, it's not a red district. It's not only a red district. So,
but it has started leaning much more conservatively. When you look at the members in the state house, it's all red.
Just a very quick yes or no. Will this race be a referendum on who gets to control, which party controls the House of Representatives?
Yes.
No.
Okay, we'll see. That's all for this edition of Political Brew. I want to thank our analysts, Joe Bruno and Betsy Sweet, for joining us, and thank you for watching.